The bar was a haze of cigarette smoke and cheap whiskey, the kind of place where dreams went to drown. In the heart of a dusty Nevada town, under flickering neon, she sat alone at the counter. Evelyn Carter, a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the desert itself. Her hair was pulled back tight, her denim jacket frayed at the cuffs, and her eyes carried a weight that made the regulars glance away. They called her Simple Evie, the woman who cleaned houses and kept to herself, her life a mystery they'd long stopped trying to solve. But tonight, something was different. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her glass, and the air around her seemed to hum with a secret. A group of loudmouths at the back of the bar, big men with bigger egos, spotted her and started their usual game. "Hey, Evie," one sneered, "you gonna scrub our floors next?" The others laughed, their voices cutting through the jukebox's wail. She didn't flinch, not yet. But when one of them, a burly guy named Rick, swaggered over and leaned too close, whispering something cruel, her sleeve slid up. There, on her forearm, was a tattoo, an eagle, globe, an anchor, the Marine Corps emblem. The bar went quiet. Rick froze, his smirk fading as her eyes met his, cold, unflinching, and dangerous. This wasn't Simple Evie, this was someone else entirely. "Hey, if you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it means you won't miss the next story that'll keep you up at night." Evelyn Carter wasn't born in that desert town, though you'd never know it from the way she blended into its cracks. She'd arrived 5 years ago, a stranger with the duffel bag and no explanations. The townsfolk had their theories: runaway life, grieving widow, maybe just another drifter chewed up by life. She took a job cleaning houses for the wealthier folks up on the ridge, her hands calloused from bleach and brooms. She spoke little, smiled less, and never lingered long enough for anyone to ask questions. To them, she was just Eva, quiet, plain, forgettable. But the truth? The truth was buried deeper than the roots of the Joshua trees outside. Evelyn had been a Marine, one of the first women to serve in a combat role. She'd seen things and done things that would make the men in that bar choke on their beer. Her tattoo wasn't just ink, it was a scar, a badge, a reminder of a life she'd tried to leave behind. But tonight, Rick and his crew had pushed too far, and something inside her was waking up. The bar's silence stretched, heavy as the desert heat. Rick stepped back, his bravado crumbling under Evelyn's stare. "What's that supposed to mean?" he muttered, pointing at her tattoo, but his voice lacked its earlier venom. The other patrons leaned in, sensing the shift. Evelyn set her glass down, deliberate and slow. "Means I'm not who you think," she said, her voice low, like the rumble of a distant storm. The bartender, a grizzled man named Joe who'd seen every kind of trouble, raised an eyebrow but didn't interfere. He knew better. Rick, though, wasn't smart enough to back off. "Oh, come on," he laughed, trying to rally his buddies. "You're telling me Simple Evie's some kind of soldier?" "What, you polish boots for the Marines?" His friends chuckled, but it was nervous now, uncertain. Evelyn stood, her chair scraping against the worn floor. She wasn't tall, but the way she carried herself made the room feel smaller. "You want to find out what ID?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. The bar held its breath. Flashback to 2003. Iraq. The sun was a merciless fist, pounding the earth into submission. Lance Corporal Evelyn Carter was 24, her face streaked with dust and sweat as she led her squad through a maze of bombed-out streets. She wasn't supposed to be there, not in combat, not according to the rules back then. But Evelyn had never been one for rules. She'd fought her way into the Marines, proving herself tougher than most of the men who doubted her. That day, her unit was ambushed. Bullets tore through the air, and her best friend, a kid from Ohio named Danny, took her round to the chest. Evelyn dragged him to cover, her hands slick with his blood, barking orders to her squad as she returned fire. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter. By the time the dust settled, she'd saved 3 lives and earned a Bronze Star. But Danny didn't make it. That night, under a sky that felt too big, she got her tattoo, a promise to never forget the cost of war. She carried that weight every day, even now, in this nowhere bar, facing down a man who thought he could break her with words. Back in the present, Rick was still talking, but his voice was losing its edge. "You don't scare me, lady," he said, though his eyes darted to his friends for backup. Evelyn took a step closer, and the room seemed to tilt. You don't know what scares me," she said, her voice steady but laced with something dark, something that made the hairs on Rick's neck stand up. The other patrons were riveted now, some pulling out their phones, sensing this was about to become a story they'd tell for years. Joe the bartender leaned forward, his hand resting near the bat he kept under the counter, but he didn't move. He'd seen enough fights to know this wasn't one. This was something else, a reckoning. Evelyn's gaze swept the room, taking in the faces of the men who'd mocked her for years, the ones who'd called her weak, invisible. "You think you know me?" she said, louder now, her voice carrying over the jukebox. "You don't know a damn thing." She rolled up her sleeve further, revealing more of the tattoo, its edges worn but proud. "This," she said, pointing to it, "means I've fought harder battles than you'll ever dream of. It means I've carried men twice your size out of hell. It means I don't break." Rick opened his mouth, but no words came. The bar was a pressure cooker, every eye on Evelyn. One of Rick's friends, a guy named Tommy who'd always been the quieter one, stepped forward. "Look, Evie, we didn't mean to." She cut him off with a look. "Don't," she said. "You don't get to apologize now. You don't get to pretend you didn't laugh." The room was electric, the kind of moment that could tip into chaos or collapse into silence. Then, from the back, a woman's voice broke the tension. "Tell A.M., Evie," she said. It was Clara, the diner waitress who'd known Evelyn longer than most. Clara had her own scars, her own stories, and she'd always suspected Evie was more than she let on. That one spark was all it took. Evelyn turned back to Rick, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You want to know what I did in the Marines? I'll tell you one thing." She leaned in, close enough that he could feel her breath. "I learned how to make men like you regret opening their mouths." Rick stumbled back, his bravado gone, replaced by something like fear. The bar erupted not in violence, but in murmurs, gasps, a few scattered claps. Evelyn didn't need to throw a punch, she'd already won. She grabbed her jacket, tossed a few bills on the counter, and walked out into the night, leaving the bar in stunned silence. But the story didn't end there. Word spread like wildfire. By morning, the town was buzzing. Simple Evie wasn't so simple anymore. People started piecing things together. Her quiet strength, the way she never flinched, the scars they'd never noticed before. Some said she'd been a hero, others whispered she'd done things too dark to speak of. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between. Days later, Rick tried to make amends. He found Evelyn outside the hardware store, loading paint cans into her truck. "Evie, I'm sorry," he said, his voice small. She didn't look at him, just kept working. "You're not sorry," she said. "You're embarrassed." "There's a difference." Rick stood there, awkward, until she finally turned to face him. "You want to make it right? Start treating people better. Start with yourself." He nodded, unable to meet her eyes, and walked away. Evelyn didn't need his apology. She'd spent years rebuilding herself after the war, after losing Danny, after leaving the Marines, after trying to find a place where she could breathe again. This town had been her refuge, but it had also been her cage. That night in the bar, something had shifted. She wasn't hiding anymore. The town changed after that. People stopped calling her Simple Evie. They started asking questions, offering respect, even kindness. Clara invited her to the diner for coffee, and for the first time, Evelyn said yes. She didn't tell her whole story, and not yet, but she didn't need to. The tattoo had done the talking. It was more than ink, it was her truth, her fight, her survival. And as the weeks passed, Evelyn started to feel something she hadn't in years. Pride. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing who you are, even when the world tries to forget. So, here we are, at the end of Evelyn's story, or maybe just the beginning. A woman who walked through fire, who carried her scars in silence, who turned a bar full of doubters into believers with a single glance. It's the kind of story that sticks with you, that makes you wonder who else is out there, hiding their strength behind a quiet smile. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments, and let's see how far this story travels.